Welcome to this episode of the Customer-Centric Retailing Podcast, a forum for retail leaders to discuss industry trends, challenges, and opportunities.
This is Anil.
And this is Fabi, and each episode we invite some of the brightest minds in the industry to discuss the future of customer centricity, with topics ranging from the rise of e-commerce to brick-and-mortar operations, to omni-channel technology to retail culture, and how all of these elements come together to create customer-centric retailing. Today we have with us Cynthia Hollen, CEO of Omnitail Strategies. Cynthia has over 20 years of experience working with the world's top retailers, brands, and wholesalers, and has launched several successful companies herself, including one of the first e-commerce consultancies. Welcome to the podcast, Cynthia. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Nice to meet you, Fabiana.
Absolutely. Great to have you. So before we jump in, can you just give our audience a brief intro to yourself and your career progression so far, just to get us started here?
My name is Cynthia Hollen, and I've been working in e-commerce since the beginning of e-commerce. I launched some of the very earliest and best e-commerce businesses with people like Bloomingdale's and Xenia when we were really just trying to figure out what it meant and what shipping meant and what consumers are looking for from us. And I have continued to innovate e-commerce and digital strategies with companies from Nike to launch startups and e-commerce technology platforms to this very day, where we're trying to figure out what new clienteling solutions look like and what curbside pickup looks like and what malls look like in a new world where retail has become, or real estate has become, less relevant.
Great. Yeah. So a ton of good experience there, and we look forward to kind of picking into a bunch of those different areas that you mentioned there. But I actually wanted to start off by asking you about an article that you recently posted on your LinkedIn from Forbes.
Yes.
Because the article was all about how during the pandemic, according to several research studies, 75% of Americans have switched brands over the course of the last couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was really unexpected when I read that. And really interested. So I was just curious what made you share that article and what your thoughts are on how brands can, best survive or even capitalize on consumer behavior during this time.
So it's the capitalized piece that made me share that article, because while everyone was panicking that the world was crashing around them, the smart brands who were able to get out in front of it and say, I have a captive audience, literally sitting at home, looking around, exploring things on Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and talking to their friends, shopping online, getting coupons and deals, completely either willing to try new brands by just something to do out of boredom or out of necessity because what they normally get at the store wasn't easily available to them online, caused an incredible shift towards the brands that were prepared to do e-commerce fast and first. So a lot of the direct-to-consumer brands that had not been well known in February became household names by April because people were looking for solutions and they were there to present them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we talk about on this podcast a lot, is how prior to this pandemic, it was taking people months and years and several years to get any kind of omni-channel project up and running. And now, necessity has made people move a lot faster and respond to consumers a lot faster. And so I think that's really interesting that so many consumers are changing their brands at a time when you would think that they'd be really entrenched in what they already know and love. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for brands to kind of step up there.
But I think that brands need to learn that this wasn't just driven by the consumers. And if they really need to look inward at themselves and see what happened in the last 9 months, it wasn't just that the consumers were open to things. It was by necessity that brands had to look internally at how to move more quickly and, one, get off airplanes and actually get on the phone and sit with your teams and figure out how to get stuff done fast and work like a lean organization that in the last 10 years, a lot of companies have forgotten how to be. And second, to really let the ideas and the innovations get out of multiple rounds of months and months of committee and consideration and just try things and see what works. Because the pull came from the consumers, but the push came from the innovators.
Well, Cynthia, you brought up some really interesting topic. Number one is that lean, and then spend time with your team and innovate. Right? That's interesting because when we work with the big corporations, they really get into this whole long phase of selection, and they involve those many different people. And big corporations in their buying of, like, especially with the technology buying and all that, and generally those projects run in millions and millions of dollars. Instead of trying to instead of putting together quick solution to at least experiment and see if it works and then go and invest more money into it, they take like a year to take their decision, and then another few years, and millions of dollars, and then after 5 years they conclude that omnichannel doesn't work.
That's right.
So I really like your idea, that particularly in today's world when we have so many good cloud-based solutions available under SaaS licensing, it just makes it possible for any retailer to try out new concepts much more easily and in much shorter time spent. So time to market is reduced. And even the total cost of ownership is reduced because you don't have to spend upfront so much money.
So it's up to the solution providers to make sure that that onboarding process is as painless as possible, because you're right. A typical sales cycle for an e-commerce technology solution, even if it's small, can be up to 18 months. And that VP of e-commerce is inundated daily with dozens of people telling them that they're going to help them increase their revenue, increase their conversion rates, reduce their costs, reduce their returns. And everybody from credit card processors to A/B testing solutions to new visualization and merchandising solutions to new marketing platforms all tell them that they can achieve those same things, right? Revenue, conversion, cost reduction, returns reduction, improved customer loyalty, all of those pieces. And it becomes overwhelming quickly. We in the world of technology solution providers don't realize that our message is so similar to those of people who are providing completely different solutions to ours, and we can't, if unless we let them try our solution quickly and make it simple, we are going to get lost in that 18-month sales cycle. But what you're saying, just trying something for a week, seeing if it's working, and getting out of the way of the analysis paralysis that so many retailers have fallen back into in the last 10 years, is the reason that we saw e-tail jump forward 10 years in the last 6 months. Wasn't just because of the pandemic, but it's because retailers got out of their own way and tried solutions that were already sitting right out there waiting for them to experiment with.
Yeah, on that topic, in our experience, many traditional kind of brick and mortar retailers are really struggling in the area of retail technology. And in our opinion, it's because they're relying on legacy technology to achieve those modern day customer experiences. And more generally, many traditional retailers can't seem to stay with the pace of customer preferences and expectations, even though they certainly have the money to invest in the technology that they would need. So I'm curious why you think that so many retailers are unwilling to innovate, or they're slow to innovate, and embrace new ways of operating their business.
Well, you have to protect your brand. First and foremost, when you work for a large company, a multi-billion dollar brand, your job, number one, is to do no harm, right? And you probably have a head of e-commerce and a head of marketing and a head of operations and a head of technology. And then you might be part of a portfolio of brands where you're at a large beauty company, for instance, and there are 30 or 40 brands under that umbrella, and each of you are looking to innovate within your own beauty brand, but ultimately the IT decisions go up to corporate where the core infrastructure is being decided. For instance, right? That's an example. Those are the kinds of things, those are the inherent structural barriers that push the decision making to out to a committee level decision making where everyone wants to find the best and safest solution, and only the safest ones really make it through, or the urgent ones. So if I can come to you and say, I know I can double your revenue, I know I can open up the Middle East or Latin America or European sales revenue for you easily. I know I can let you do a marketplace where you can have your fashion get tried on a model in a separate environment that you don't have to mess around with all of the rest of your branding and logos, and we can do it on the side and do a test. Those are the kinds of things that tend to break through because you can go a little bit rogue as the VP of e-commerce and kind of bypass the rest of your team. But once it actually has to get integrated in, the committee level of decision making is both a safety and a massive, massive barrier. And I think we've erred way too far on the side of safety, clearly because the people who are being safe are dying.
Yep, completely agree with you there. And one of Anil and I's favorite phrase there is nobody ever got fired for buying IBM, right? It's the safe choice. The committee's never going to come down on you if it doesn't completely meet your customer expectations, but everyone's buying it, so you didn't really make the wrong choice there.
That's
But I'm curious, the looking at the modern shopping experience, and the buzzword now is really omni-channel. Everyone's talking about omni-channel, unified commerce, and that can mean so many things. But in your opinion, from a technology perspective, what are the different technologies that you think are must-haves for retailers today, whether they're e-commerce only or a blend of e-commerce and brick and mortar?
Well, I've been calling it omnitailing since the 90s when I coined the phrase. So let's use that. Because what we're
Let's
doing is we're allowing shoppers to shop from you anytime, anywhere, anyhow. And even at the very, very beginning of e commerce, that meant, do I think about my catalog customer who wants to call me on an 800 number differently than my customer who's walking into the store, than my customer who's coming to my website? Now, I like thinking of it in those absolute terms because it seems so archaic and unbelievable that 20 years ago we were still separating our catalog customers literally in a separate database and not combining their orders with a customer that was going online. It seems impossible to believe that we were doing that 20 years ago, but we're still doing it today. We're still saying that your customer who comes into your store is a completely separate person than the person who's shopping for you on your site. Or we're saying that the person who comes to your site, who, for instance, wants to buy vitamins for her children, is the same as the same person who comes to your site later in the day because she wants to buy and research vitamins for herself because she's preparing to run a marathon. In those cases, I'm actually two separate people. So it's really important in an omnitailing situation to understand not only how the person's coming to you, but what frame of mind and what needs and what modes they're in. And the technologies that are starting to allow that today, of course, are the ones that allow me to pull my customer who's walking into my store together with my customer who's coming to me on any platform, whether it's mobile or 800 number, which still exists, by the way, and or my online or my social channels, right? But it's also pulling through those clienteling solutions, whether they're staffed or artificial intelligence, and reaching out to that person and saying, hey, Cynthia, I know you were here the other day and you bought such and such, and something new came in that's going to match. And I'm not talking about what Amazon does, that they just say, oh, you like this and you might like that, but something that's really more personal, that's more that's more targeted, that really actually makes me feel special. Those are the technologies that retailers who have been successful in the last 6 months are embracing and wildly profiting from.
Cynthia, you mentioned about clienteling, and that's another very interesting phrase, term that I like a lot. So I want to get more information about clienteling from you. Like, what do you think is a good clienteling technology should have today, and how retailers should be using it for delivering the enhanced or the real experience that your Gen Z customers or the new age customers are really looking for?
Well, let's think about what clienteling used to mean pre internet or pre pandemic, right? Clienteling was what high end sales associates or brand ambassadors would do when they had their VIP customers, and they would keep their own private books, their own private databases. And I know the name and birthday of your dog, and I know the last five, Chanel dresses and jackets that you bought. And I know when you go next door to Burberry, I know what you bought over there. And I know that you always go for tea down the street right after that. And I'm going to, when you come into my store, I'm going to call down the street and make sure that there's tea set up for you next door when you come in. Or I'm going to remember to send you a birthday note or even a birthday gift, right? That's the ultimate, what we've always thought of clienteling to be. I'm going to come in a car and bring something to your house in the middle of a pandemic because you can't leave your house. And I'm going to take all of the new Celine bags and I'm going to bring them to your house and let you take a look at them during a pandemic so you can still buy from me. That's what we started seeing happening in March, right? It's just this quick, what do I do? How do I go from my paper books to using technology in some way? How do I take FaceTime and still walk around my store? In China, how do I do live broadcasts from the store with sales associates walking around the store and showing off product and doing real-time selling? To now technologies that have really come into their own even in the last 4 months, where that CRM database piece can get married with a live chat piece. So you look at a company like LuxLock, LuxLock, which is a brand new clienteling solution that's integrated with live chat, but allows experienced professional shoppers to use visual selling and chat selling and connections from session to session. So I remember where we were when you were here last, and really treat a medium level or high end customer like the VIP customer that she's used to being treated like when she would walk into a Neiman Marcus or a Bergdorf's.
Wow, wow, that's great.
The word that came to mind when you were speaking, Cynthia, was creativity, when you were explaining all of those different kinds of customer experiences and really meeting the customer where they are. So going beyond just, we have a store and you can come in and if you can buy something if you want, if we're open. And to me, it seems like digitally native brands, so the ones that started e-commerce, saw some success there. Typically, e-commerce brands make a good use of social media channels and stuff to promote their brand initially. And then when they make it big, they all tend to want to go into brick and mortar, right? Because as much as people say that it's dead, it's really not. And whenever e-commerce brands grow enough, they do want to open stores as well. And when we speak to traditional brick and mortar retailers, the ones that have had a store for decades now, they struggle to compete with those digitally native brands because they feel like they have a leg up, right? They started online, they understand online. It's easier for them to be omni-channel because they're starting the brick and mortar from scratch. And so they can build it the way they want it, as opposed to having to, take things out and put new things back in. So I was just curious if you had any advice for traditional brick and mortar retailers as they look to kind of compete with their younger and digitally native counterparts there.
Yes. Forget about the words brick and mortar. Your hurdles to being innovative are not the bricks. The hurdles to being innovative are not the existing technologies you have in place. The hurdles are you're thinking of yourself as a legacy brand instead of thinking of yourself as an innovator. I I spoke to a sales associate at a Prada store recently, and she told me, so you can't get more, you know, legacy, right, than a luxury, a high-end luxury Italian brand inside a Neiman Marcus store boutique, inside one of the most luxury malls in the world at the Bal Harbour Mall. And I spoke to her in May and I said, "How has it been going for you for the last 2 months?" And she said, "I got my FaceTime camera out and I got on the phone with my regular customers and I've been selling to them the whole way through. And I get in a taxi and I go to the store because I have a pass to get in the back door. And I go and I get stuff and I take them to my customers and my sales have been doing great." So that's brick and mortar, that's legacy, that's old infrastructure, that's letting your innovative people bring the innovation to your business, people who know how to listen to your customers, right? A second example, one of my favorite examples of the year, is an owner of a landscaping company, a small local landscaping company, who got a phone call from a customer saying, "Oh, I'm just so depressed. I just need something, but I don't feel safe coming in and looking around at the plants. What do you recommend that will cheer me up?" And the owner of the landscaping company said, "I can take this camera and I can walk you around my store and show me all of my plants. But why don't you take the camera and walk me around your house? Because for the first time ever, I can see your house. And I'm going to show you what's going to work great in every single corner of your house." And at the end of the day, ended up sending about $1,000 worth of perfect plants to their customer and launched an entire new kind of business. In-house landscaping from my local landscaper is something nobody's ever done before. So those are both examples of traditional, probably third generation landscaping company that are brick and mortar that were able to think lean and think creative and just do what needs to get done. And that's my number one advice to anybody, whether they're D2C or 2 months in business or 200 years in business. Pay attention to your customers and get out of your own way in your head.
Yeah, this is interesting. We've been having few other conversations, and store associates, your last connection with your customer, last mile connection with your customer, they are your, the brand ambassadors.
Yeah.
These store associates do miracle, and they are actually the people who are going to sell to your customers. So having those store associates being encouraged, motivated, allowed to go extra mile, allowed to use technology or whatever, things they can do to engage the customer and make it really a buying experience be really memorable is very important. And actually these stores that we have are really, your what media, I would say they are your marketing channel. Don't think of them just like a simple point of sale. It's not about just billing your customer. It's about like engaging your customer and building your brand loyalty and all that, right? Because that's what these guys are doing. They are engaging the customer, giving them those experiences, and building the reputation of our brand that follows. And this happy customer is going to go bring more customers actually.
So not only allowing those sales associates to do what they do, but really listening to them, because that's the way you're going to find out what your customers are really responding to and what your customers are really asking for. So wrapping yourself around those sales associates and empowering them and learning from them. And you're exactly right, Anil, trying to figure out where my brick and mortar can make sense as a showroom, as a studio, as a micro fulfillment warehouse, because it's closer to where my customers are than my traditional warehouses. So maybe I don't need as many physical locations, but maybe I don't need to think of them as the traditional walk in, pack a package, swipe a credit card, walk out place that they used to be.
Yeah, and in the first example that you gave there, Cynthia, I think you said a retailer like Prada is the first one to come to mind when you think kind of legacy brick and mortar. And I think for most people, when they when they're given that term, kind of legacy brick and mortar, they think of luxury brands. And I know that you have quite a bit of experience in working with these types of brands. And some of them are really stepping up, right? So they're starting to use Instagram and the shoppable features on Instagram, and really taking a more omni-channel approach. But I was wondering if you have any specific advice to luxury brands in terms of rolling out a more direct-to-consumer strategy that's more e-commerce focused as opposed to what they more traditionally are known for.
Well, I think this advice is probably about a year late because I think they've all figured this out by now, but it's the same advice that we've all been giving them for 15 years. Don't treat e commerce like the ugly stepchild here, right? This is not a, a thing that you have to do whether you like it or not, and you're going to kind of do it on the side. This needs your customer is not, you don't have a percent of your customer that you have to handle online. You have all of your customers who want to be able to be serviced in the way that's convenient to them in the moment. So it's treat your e-commerce as an integrated a part of your business, not only from a technology standpoint but from a management team standpoint. Your CEO needs to be thinking about e-commerce, and your marketing people shouldn't be separated into marketing real and marketing online, right? That's, think of it as an omnitailing solution where it is literally just selling to the same person from different points of view, and you'll be able to take advantage of your legacy-ness and your power. All the things that should be your assets should not be your liabilities. Win because you're big and strong and well known and have infrastructure. Don't lose because of it.
So Cynthia, isn't it that when the customer walks into the store and the customer is already engaged with your brand? I think with all these digital technologies like your e-commerce, your mobile, and all that. In fact, what we are doing is we are allowing customer to bring the store with them on their phone to their home, to their
That's right.
living room, and they can put it down when they want to, and if they want to get to it, it's just like in their palm, like they can just pull it out and start doing it. So really, I think the technology has provided these brands with the opportunity to be there for customer when they want, where they want, and still think it is not something that is separate. It's like it's allowing them to bring the store, the nearest store that I have, the associate that I have at this store, with me to my home. Because this technology, when your brick and mortar and e-com and all this is really integrated, your store inventory, your store activities, store events, store associate, everybody is accessible for me from my phone.
Now, what you said is really important because you use the word store, but then you talk about words like event and things. So let's think about it not as my store that's in my phone, but my community and my entertainment and my social activities. So now my friend at Prada, who sent me a text message with the new bag that she knows I'm going to love because it's, it's the beige version of the black one that she knows I loved last spring, right? Now I'm not only bringing the store into my home, I'm integrating it into my life. And if my local mall can start thinking like that as not a landlord for retail, but instead how to make me part of a community, then malls themselves can start to become more relevant again as well, because they can be that bridge, that social bridge, that community bridge that helps connect me through my local community, through my local knowledge. I'm sitting here in Miami right now. I really want a brand to be selling to me based on knowing that gosh, it's 75 degrees right now, and Cynthia might need a sweater because she might be chilly. Whereas all the ads out there are for parkas because everybody else in the rest of the world is freezing to death because it's snowing. And that makes me smile because you recognize that I need something to go for a walk on the beach. And because you're selling to me from my local community. So again, taking advantage of the broad reach of your enterprise of your enterprise, or figure out what your advantages are in your connections to the community. And then absolutely there are thousands of technologies out there that can help you quickly capture and execute on the thing that you've identified as your best asset. They're really out there. And if they're not out there, there are companies that can help you build them within months.
Something that you said there that I think is fascinating is you have some really interesting and valuable experience in working with retailers that have a strong presence in America's malls. And that's another one where a lot of people like to say, you know, the malls are over and they're really struggling, particularly during the pandemic. And then others are saying that they're making a comeback. So I'm curious what your opinion is on the future of mall-based retailing. Do you think it's on its way out? Do you think retailers should be moving to the high streets instead? Or is there a way to keep the malls profitable and keep them going?
I subscribe to the overstored philosophy, which is that it's it's not that malls are dead, it's that we built too many of them in the first place. We have we have 2 or 3 times more square footage of retail per capita than Europe, and 10 times more square footage per capita than Asia. We just built way more stores. I don't need a Gap on every single street corner, right? Especially um, when I need something quickly, I can have it delivered within a couple of days. So where I can go to a mall that's maybe a half an hour drive from me, I don't necessarily need 2 more that are a 15-minute drive from me. So while we right size the number of retail physical locations we have and repurpose them to either pickup locations, delivery locations, showrooming locations, service locations where I can go and get things repaired or hemmed, things like that. While I repurpose those, people are still going to want to physically go out. What did you do in the middle of April when the only time you were allowed to go out was go to the grocery store? My most exciting time of the day was to go to the grocery store. Like, yay, I get to go buy Brussels sprouts, and I get all, I went to the grocery store every single day because it was the thing I was allowed to do. People like physically getting out and touching things and seeing what's going on in the world. And even teenagers still like going out, and people still like the social aspect of shopping. What's happened fascinating, the famous Paco Underhill told me of a story that he was working with Brooks Brothers on their dressing rooms. And this is in one of his books. That Brooks Brothers was finding that people were spending far more time in the last 10 years in dressing rooms, and the lines were getting longer and longer. And this is men's dressing rooms, right? Like, what the heck is going on that our dressing rooms are getting all backed up? And it turned out that people were going into dressing rooms with their phones and taking pictures of themselves in the dressing rooms and shopping with their friends from inside the dressing room, from inside the store, so they could try things on. So they turned the dressing rooms into advertising by putting pictures of Brooks Brothers classic products all over the walls, so that those sessions, those private dressing room sessions, were turning into Instagram studio shoots and making Brooks Brothers, cool to shop in for that crowd of people. So that's to say that there's always something about the physicalness of shopping that we've wanted to do since we were gathering berries in the fields, right? It's a social activity. So malls need to figure out how they fit into that world where they're no longer the only place I can go and get things. I saw ads in the last 3 weeks that were brilliant from Simon Properties saying skip the shipping, just come to the mall. So they just turned e-commerce on its head and said, gosh, the biggest pain we're having right now during this e-commerce season is everybody worrying about when your package is going to get there on time. Why are you people dealing with all of this horrible e-commerce nonsense? Don't you know you could just come to the mall and get it? And I just thought that that was just a brilliant, 180 on the entire e-commerce challenge.
Yeah, I think it's all about being smart about the way that you market yourself, right? Because exactly as you said, during the pandemic, as much as people said before the pandemic that they really prefer the e-commerce way of shopping and brick and mortar is dead, when the pandemic hit and all of the malls closed and all the shops closed, people felt that, right? People felt a need to go into the shops, and
Right.
people didn't like that they couldn't go in store. And so that goes to show you it's almost like the proof that we all needed through the pandemic that brick and mortar is still very much needed, and people do like that social interaction, and it is a social experiment or experience, as exactly as you said. um, I think we could go on for hours and hours with you, Cynthia. There are so many questions that we could ask you. Your expertise is so varied, so maybe we'll have to do a whole series with just Cynthia. But we wanted to
Let's do
to
it.
thank yeah, to thank you so much for your time today. It's great to have you on, and we wanted to kind of conclude with you telling the audience kind of what 2021 looks like for you, what's next for you, and how people can keep up with you.
Right now, I'm working with brands and e-commerce technology companies and investors on understanding what the most innovative retailers are doing and how to either sell to them or how to help them grow as quickly as possible and take advantage of the vast new opportunities that have just been put in front of us. And these things need to be grabbed quickly because the fast movers are the ones who are going to double, triple, quadruple their revenue in the next year, like we have in any crisis. So I love working with e-commerce companies who need to connect with brands to help them figure out how to leverage their solutions. And I love working with brands who want to move fast.
Great, we do too. So again, such a special thank you for you joining us today, and we really recommend to our audience to follow you on LinkedIn because you post a lot of really interesting articles that I think are an insight into what you're thinking of, and so really recommend our audience to follow your journey and to listen to this episode and learn all of those nuggets of insights that you shared with us today.
Thanks, and I look forward to working with both of you this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Ravi.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
That's it for this episode of the Customer-Centric Retailing Podcast, featuring our special guest, Cynthia Hollen. Having worked with leading retailers for over 20 years, Cynthia is confident that brands need to evolve and innovate in order to thrive. Playing it safe is just about the riskiest thing you can do when everything around you is changing. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Please rate and review and recommend to a friend or fellow retail fanatic. This podcast is brought to you by Hot Wax Commerce.